We've done that route that the accident happened on hundreds of times. In the summer, we'd cross that road at least 3 times a week. And although it was always the most dreaded part of that hack because, you know, it's a dangerous road, we'd never had an actual incident until that day, obviously.
On the 10th of October 2020, my daughter and a friend of hers went out on their horses for a hack to a place that they'd been to many times before, and whilst on that hack, approaching a busy A road with a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit, my daughter and her horse Rambo were hit by a car.
It was an ordinary day for us. We'd been to Joshua's football match, and we'd gone past the Pulborough Brooks, and obviously on that bend slowed down, and next thing you know, we're on top of the bridleway pretty much. By the time we saw Amy and Rambo, they were literally at the entrance of the bridleway onto the road.
My friend Emily and I were approaching this road, getting ready to cross it, and a motorbike went past. Not particularly loud, not particularly fast. Both horses have been around motorbikes and are usually fine. But for some reason, this day they just did not like it. And Emily's horse, Misty, went right into the bushes. And on my left, there was a big wire fence. So the only direction Rambo could go was forward. And obviously, unfortunately, a couple of metres in front of us was the road.
I got a call from Amy. All I could hear was her sort of gasping down the phone, and her voice was very distraught, saying that she and Rambo had been hit and could I please come quickly. And I can't tell you what I felt in those moments. I mean, this is a call that you always know you might get one day, but you don't really expect to, and here I was getting that call.
By the time we saw Amy and Rambo, they were literally at the entrance of the bridleway onto the road, and suddenly broke as hard as I could and I swerved. Luckily there was nothing on the other side of the road. Luckily it was a side impact, took out our side window and my wing mirror off. I saw the worst thing for me was, as we made contact, just looking into Amy's eyes and how scared she was. I mean, I must have been just the same.
Obviously I'd been knocked off because of the impact, but when I got up and saw him trotting down, obviously he hadn't been knocked over, it was an immediate relief. But when I caught him and saw his injuries, it was a terrifying moment because he literally had a section of his chest hanging off him. His neck was completely cut up with glass still stuck in it, and he had 2 very obviously deep puncture wounds in his chest too. Once I'd caught Rambo, I then rang my mum and told her what had happened. Obviously I was distraught, but I told her to come as soon as she could, and then I rang the police. Sadie came over to help us too, and thankfully she knows horses, she knows they can be unpredictable, and she knew it wasn't our fault, just like obviously I knew it wasn't hers. She just was unlucky enough to be driving down that road at that time.
I had no idea whether Rambo was going to be lying on the road, whether Amy was going to be terribly injured. I knew she was speaking to me, but I didn't know to what extent either of them would be hurt. And I can't tell you how relieved I was when I got there and I saw them both standing.
Just seeing Rambo, you know, with all this open wound and blood and just dripping. I just felt so guilty. The problem was I didn't even see Amy and Rambo, even though Amy had a high-vis jacket on. It was so overgrown.
It was actually only after we'd left the scene and visited the vets and they told us that Rambo was going to be okay that my adrenaline wore off and I realised how badly I was actually hurt. I hadn't hit my head luckily, but I had fallen quite badly on my back onto the road. So we went to A&E and they told me I had quite deep muscle trauma, but again, I would be okay. So for a horrifically unlucky situation, both of us were so lucky actually, and it was just an unlucky situation because no one involved was doing anything wrong.
The foliage was far too high, far too overgrown, far too close to the road. The signage in both directions is completely inefficient. One far too close to the bridleway, giving drivers no time to react. The other 3/4 of a mile away, meaning most drivers would have completely forgotten they'd seen the sign by the time they get to the bridleway exit onto the road. The road speed limit 60 miles an hour. That's just an accident waiting to happen where you've got a horses crossing. Those red triangles which inform drivers of horses on the road ahead of them do not give the story where a bridleway actually leads onto the road, and we need to have signs, not just in West Sussex but all over the place. We need to have signs that properly indicate that horses are going to be crossing. And I'm delighted obviously to be working with the advice and the help and the backing of the British Horse Society. But I think it's going to be a long haul. But as an industry, as an equestrian industry, I would just be really keen to have other agencies and other partners joining in, because this is just, it's dangerous. It's dangerous for horses on the road these days.
I think the change that I'd like to see happen is a lot better signage in areas where there are horses, as well as horse crossings just made safer in general, really. And I think motorists need to be alerted that even if you're not passing or overtaking a horse, literally walking on the road, you do still need to slow down significantly if you see one. Because even just the sound of you passing at 60 miles an hour is enough to really scare a horse, and in a lot of cases the horse and rider will not be as lucky as Rambo and me were.
So to drivers, if you see any sign on the road indicating horses, then slow down. They may not be in front of you, they may be to the side of you, close to the road, waiting to cross. To county councils and road safety agencies, start taking horses on the road seriously. Stop waiting for that magic number of deaths or injuries before you decide to invest in safety measures. And to equestrians, when you're on the roads, high vis always, because if you don't follow good practice, you can't expect anybody else to.
After about 3 weeks in the hospital, Rambo came home, where he then spent a few more weeks resting before we started to slowly bring him back into work. His injuries have healed perfectly, they're barely even noticeable anymore, and his personality has never changed from the friendly, hard-working horse he's always been. They absolutely adored him in the vets, and it was a very bittersweet goodbye when he came home. Mentally, it did affect me quite badly. I did find it really hard to get back on, just terrified that something bad and out of my control would happen to him again. But we have both gradually gained our confidence back and are completely in full work, and we're even out hacking again.